July 24th, 1909, Volume 9. Everything the soul does out of love for God enters into him and is transformed into his own works. I was thinking of the misery of my present state, and I said to myself, how everything is over for me. How good Jesus has forgotten about everything. He no longer remembers my hardships, and the sufferings I have gone through for love of him during many years of bed. And so my mind kept going back to some specialties of suffering, and the gravest ones, which I have gone through. At that moment, blessed Jesus told me, "My daughter, everything that is done for love of me enters into me, and is transformed into my own works. And since my works are for the good of all, that is, for the pilgrim, the purging, and the triumphant souls, everything you have done and suffered for me is present in me, and does its office for the good of all, just as my works. Would you rather take them back into yourself?" I answered, "May it never be, O Lord." But in spite of this, I continued to think about it, being a little distracted from my usual interior work. And good Jesus repeated, "You don't want to stop it? I am going to make you stop it." And he placed himself in my interior, praying in a loud voice, and saying all that I was supposed to say. On seeing this, I remained confused, and I followed good Jesus. And when he saw that I was no longer paying attention to anything else, then he kept silent. And I remained alone, doing what I am used to doing. July 24th, 1922, Volume 14, Bonds Between Jesus and Each Soul. Correspondence to Grace. Continuing in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus came with enchanting majesty and love, and showed me all generations, from the first to the last man, and each of them was bound and tied to my sweet Jesus. The bond was such that it seemed to multiply for each creature, in such a way that each one had him for herself alone, and that Jesus gave each life of his to suffer any pain and death which each one should suffer, so as to be able to say to the Celestial Father, "My Father, in each creature you will have as many of myself, who will give you, for each one, that which every one owes you." While I was seeing this, my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, do you also want to accept the bond with each being, so that there may be no dissimilarity between me and you?" I don't know how. I felt as if the weight of all were leaning on my shoulders. I saw my unworthiness and weakness, and I felt such repugnance as to feel faint, to the point that blessed Jesus, having compassion for me, took me in his arms and pressed me to his heart, letting me place my mouth at the opening of the wound that pierced him, telling me, "Drink, my daughter, the blood which gushes forth from this wound, that you may receive the strength that you lack. Courage, do not fear, I will be with you. We will share all the weight, the work, the pains, and the deaths. This is why I tell you, be attentive and faithful, because my grace wants correspondence. Otherwise it takes nothing to go down. What does it take to open and to close one's eyes? It takes nothing. Yet see the great good of keeping them opened, and the great harm of keeping them closed. By keeping them opened, the eyes are filled with light, with the sun. And with this light the hand can work, the foot can walk safely and without stumbling. One can distinguish objects, whether they are good or bad. One can reorder things, read and write. Now what does it take to lose all this good? Closing one's eyes. And then the hand cannot work, the foot cannot walk, and if it does, it is subject to stumbling. One can no longer distinguish objects. He reduces himself to inability. Such is the correspondence. Nothing but opening the eyes of the soul. And as one opens them, light comes to the mind. My image is reflected in all that she does, copying me faithfully, in such a way that she does nothing but receive continuous light from me, so as to convert all of her being into light. On the other hand, lack of correspondence plunges the soul into darkness and renders her inactive. July 24th, 1923, Volume 16, The Divine Will and the Human Will. The will of God grants us its possession more than its presence. The will accomplishes everything and keeps it within itself. I was feeling very oppressed because of the privation of my always adorable Jesus. I was saying to myself, everything is over for me. As much as I look for him, he doesn't come. What torture, what martyrdom. But while I was thinking about this, my adorable Jesus made himself seen crucified, laying himself upon my poor person. And a light which came from his adorable forehead said to me, "My daughter, my will contains all my being, and one who possesses it possesses me, more than if she enjoyed my continuous presence. In fact, my will penetrates everywhere, into her most intimate fibers, counting her heartbeats and thoughts. It becomes the life of the most beautiful part of the creature, her interior, from which the external works arise, as though from a spring, rendering her inseparable from me. On the other hand, if my presence does not find my will in the soul, it cannot be life of all her interior, and so she remains as though separated from me. How many souls, after having enjoyed my favors and my presence, not having in them the fullness of my will, its light and its sanctity, have engulfed themselves again in sin, have taken part in pleasures, and have separated from me, because that divine will which renders the soul untouchable from sin, even the slightest one, was not in them. Therefore the most pure, the most holy, and the greatest works are formed in those who possess all the fullness of my will. See, also in the creature, her will has the supremacy in such a way that, if there is a will, she has life, and if there is no will, she seems like a tree which, though having trunk, branches, and leaves, has no fruit. So, in the creature, the will is not thought, but it gives life to the act of her mind. It is not I, but it gives life to her gaze, because if it has a will, the eye wants to see, wants to know things. Otherwise it is as if the eye had no life. The will is not word, but it gives life to each word. It is not hand, but it gives life to the action. It is not step, but gives life to the step. It is not love, desire, affection, but it gives life to love, to desire, to affection. But this is not all. Even though the will is life of all the human acts, once the creature has performed them, she remains stripped of her own acts, just as a tree loaded with fruits is stripped by the hands of those who pick them. However, the gazes she gave, the thoughts she formed, the words she said, the actions she performed, remain as though sealed in her will. So her hand has worked, but her action does not remain in her hands. It goes beyond, and who knows where it goes, but it remains in the will. Therefore, everything is written, formed, sealed in the human will. And if this happens in the human will only because I sowed in it the seed and the likeness to mine, think about what my will is within myself, and what it will be if the creature lets herself be possessed by my will. July 24th, 1929, Volume 26. How the Divine Will Holds the Primary Act over all created things. It is like the head over the members. I was thinking about the Supreme Fiat, and I thought to myself, if the Divine Volition wants to form its kingdom in the midst of creatures, in what way, then, was the Divine Will in relationship with creatures before the coming of our Lord upon earth, when he came, and after his coming? And my sweet Jesus moving in my interior told me, my daughter, my will with its immensity has always been present in the midst of creatures, because by its own nature there is not one point in which it is not present, and creatures cannot do without it. It would be like being unable to have or receive life. Without my divine will, all things would resolve into nothing. More so, since the prime act of all created things is my divine fiat, it is like the head to the members. And if one wanted to say, I can live without the head, it would be impossible for him. The mere thinking it is the greatest of follies. However, reigning is one thing. It is to be recognized, loved, longed for, and to hang upon it like the members hang upon the head. This is reigning, whereas being in the midst of creatures is not reigning if one does not hang completely upon it. Now, before my coming upon earth, and even though my divine will was present in the midst of creatures with its immensity, the relationships that existed between it and them, however, were as if it lived in a foreign land, and they received from afar the scarce communications, the brief news, that announced to them my coming upon earth. What sorrow for it to be in their midst while they do not recognize it, and they keep it so far away from their wills, as if it were in a foreign land. With my coming, since I possessed it as life, and my humanity recognized it, loved it, and let it reign, through me it drew closer to the creatures, and the relationships it had with them were as if it lived no longer in a foreign land, but in their own lands. But since they did not know it, nor did they give it dominion in order to let it reign, it cannot be said that my divine volition formed its kingdom. Therefore, my coming upon earth served to draw the two wills, human and divine, closer to each other, and to place them in intimate relations, and to increase the news in order to make it known, so much so that I taught the Our Father, making them say, Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. If my will does not live on earth as it does in heaven, it cannot be said that it has its kingdom in the midst of creatures. And therefore, in the time of its kingdom, it will be present not only in their midst, but inside each one of them as perennial life. And in order to come to this, it must be recognized how it is like head and primary life of each creature. And because this head is not recognized, its strength, its sanctity, its beauty does not flow to the members, nor can it let its noble and divine blood flow in their veins, and therefore the life of heaven cannot be seen in creatures. So this is why I love so much that my divine will be known. Knowledge will make love arise, and feeling loved and longed for, it will feel drawn to come to reign in the midst of creatures. July 24th, 1930, Volume 28, How the Divine Will is in Continuous Attitude in the Divine Being. Prodigy of when it operates in the creature. Enjoyment of God. My poor heart finds itself between two insurmountable powers, the divine Fiat and the pain of the privation of my sweet Jesus, both of them powerful over my poor heart, such that, while I feel all the bitterness of being without He who formed all the happiness of my poor existence, and now since I don't have Him, it has converted for me into intense bitterness, the divine volition, subduing me, absorbs me into its divine will so as to transmute it into itself. Now, while I was under tremendous oppressions, my sweet Jesus, giving me a surprise, told me, "My daughter, courage, do not fear. I am here with you. And the sign is that you feel in you the life of my Fiat. I am inseparable from it. Now you must know that our will is in continuous attitude in our divine being. Its motion never ceases. Its works are always in act. Therefore it is always operating. But the marvelous surprises that occur when the creature enters into our will are enchanting and prodigious. As she enters, our volition encloses itself in the creature, and while it encloses itself to the point of filling her completely, since she cannot embrace it all or enclose it completely within herself, it overflows outside of her in such a way as to fill heaven and earth, in a way that it can be seen that the littleness of the creature encloses a divine will that maintains in her its incessant motion and its works operating. There's nothing holier, greater, more beautiful, more prodigious than the operating of my volition in the littleness of the creature. While it operates, since she can neither enclose it nor embrace it all, because she is finite and therefore does not have the capacity to enclose the immense and the infinite, yet she takes as much as she can, to the point of overflowing outside. And as it overflows, one can see the creature under a rain of light, and of varied and rare beauties, inside and out, such that our divine being takes so much delight in it, that we feel ourselves being enraptured, because we see the human littleness, by virtue of our Fiat that fills it, transmuted into the beauties of our divine qualities, that have such strength as to enrapture us, and make us enjoy in the creature our pure joys and our unspeakable happinesses. Now you must know that every time the creature calls my will as life operating in her, and she plunges into it to remain immersed in it, our enjoyment is so great that our whole being concurs, and we place in it such value, for as much value as our divine being contains. More so, since our divine Fiat has its first act of life in the act of the creature, she has been but the concurrent. Therefore, as our act, we place in it all the weight of our divine life. See, then, what it means to do an act in our will, what it means to multiply them, and the great loss for one who does not operate in it. July 24th, 1932, Volume 31, How with His Word Jesus generates His sanctity, goodness, and so forth in the creature. Follies of love in order to put her on a par and in contest with Him. My most sweet life, Jesus, my celestial teacher, take my little soul in your hands, and if you want, continue your divine lessons on your will. I feel the extreme need of being fed by your word. Besides, you yourself have me so habituated. You yourself have given me this way of life. You have made me live of you, and of your sweet word. I am certain that I have not formed this way of living. No, you did, O Jesus, so much so that I feel more you than me, and when you are silent, I feel this life of mine smashed to pieces. And although it is the hardest of my martyrdoms, yet I am ready, if you stop your speaking, to say Fiat. But have pity on me, and do not leave me alone and abandoned. So I felt all abandoned in the arms of the divine will, and I yearned for nothing other than heaven. It seemed to me that nothing more remained for me to do, except finish my life in the divine will on earth, in order to take it up again in heaven. And my celestial Jesus, visiting my little soul, told me, "My little daughter of my volition, you oppress yourself too much, and I do not want it. To see you oppressed in the midst of so many of my goods makes you see that you have more eyes for yourself than for the goods that your Jesus has given you. And by this you can see that you have not yet understood well the gifts and the goods that your Jesus has given you. You must know that every word of mine is a gift, and therefore it encloses a great good, because my word has the creative, communicative, formative virtue. And as it is pronounced by us, so it forms the new good of giving to the creature. See how many words I have spoken to you, and how many truths I have made you know, are as many gifts I have given you. And these many gifts enclose divine goods, one distinct from the other. Additionally, everything that came from our word remains. In our word is formed the good that we want to put forth from us. When this good is put forth, with certainty it will have its life in the midst of creatures, because these gifts are animated and formed by our creative power, and conserved by our same word, in order to secure the good that we want to give. And our word will move heaven and earth in order to give the fruit of the good that it possesses. Now, my daughter, you must know another surprise of our speaking. Suppose that I spoke to you about my sanctity. This word of mine encloses the gift of divine sanctity, so as to give to the creature always for as much as is possible for the creature. If I speak of the divine goodness, my word encloses the gift of goodness. If I speak of the divine will, it encloses the gift of our will. In sum, whatever our word says of beauty, of goodness, of greatness, of sanctity, that gift it encloses. Now listen to the extent of our loving stratagems. It is as if we were never content with forming new inventions of love so as to give to the creature. Therefore, if our word says sanctity, it is because we want to give the gift of our divine sanctity so that she is placed on a par with our sanctity and can be in a contest with us. And oh, our contentment when we see our divine sanctity operating in the creature. And if we hear that she says, "I feel the sanctity of my Creator impressed in me," oh, how happy I feel to be able to love with his own sanctity. Oh, then our love goes into follies and pours over her in a way so exuberant that we reach excesses. And so if our word says goodness, divine will, it is because we want to give the gift of our goodness and divine will, so that she can be on a par with our goodness and will, and she can compete with her supreme being. You cannot understand what our contentment is, to see the creature gifted by these divine qualities of ours, in which our word is bearer. And as it is our usual way to give to one creature our word, but so much is its fecundity, power, and fullness of light, the sun becomes as formed by one of our words, that with one blow of light illuminates all and gives the good that the light possesses. Then why do you oppress yourself if you see that your Jesus often makes use of his word in order to add gifts upon gifts? And these gifts are not only to have life in you, but in many other creatures, because they possess the generative strength. They give and they generate in order to give and generate again. Our word is a birth from our womb, therefore it is our child. And as children, they bear the good that was generated in their Father. So instead of oppressing yourself, think rather that your Jesus wants to make you new surprises of his divine words, so that you dispose yourself to receive a good so great. After this I continued to think about the divine will, and my very sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, when the soul lets herself be dominated, invested, subjected to my divine will, in a way that every little particle of her being, as much in the soul as in the body, all possess my operating will, such that the mind is animated by its science, the voice has speaking, the hands have operating, the feet have its divine steps, the heart has loving, and as my will knows how to love, then all this united together forms the divine sanctity in the creature, and we find all our rights in the creature, rights of creation. Because everything is ours, we find the rights of our sanctity, of our works, rights of our divine fiat, of our goodness, of our love. In sum, there is nothing of ours that we do not find in her as our right, and the creature finds in exchange her rights in her Creator, because being one will on both parts, the rights of one are rights of the other. Here, therefore, is what it means to live in our volition, to receive our sanctity, love, science, our goodness, with right, because it cannot do less than give them. Since they are of our fiat, they are her properties, because her life already lives in it. More so because one who lives in my will always grows in sanctity, in love, in our beauty, and so forth. This continuous growth forms in the creature a new act of giving to her Creator. We give the new act that we possess by nature to her, and she gives it to us by virtue of our will. And oh, the contentment on both sides, the happiness that is felt, being able to receive from the creature, and we being able to give. To give and to receive maintains the nourishment of correspondence. It conserves the always growing union, and is as the breath that maintains the fire always lit, and the flame of love lives always, without danger of being extinguished. Therefore, always forward in my will, and everything will go well. July 24th, 1934, Volume 33. How the truths that must be manifested about the divine will are established by God. How it bilocates, repeats, installs the divine life. How creation did not finish, but continues. I felt myself all immersed in the divine volition. All the truths manifested to me that regard it crowded in my mind, and they wanted to say and say again in order to make themselves known. But alas, their speaking was of heaven, too high. Many words are lacking to me in order to be able to repeat their celestial lessons, only that I felt that they were bearers of the sanctity of heaven and divine joys. But while I felt myself all immersed in the fiat, my always lovable Jesus, with an indescribable love, told me, "My little daughter of my will, As its daughter, I feel the need of love that the daughter knows its secrets. If I could not do this often, I would remain suffocated by the very high waves of love that come forth from me, such that speaking to you about my will is for me refreshment. It is relief. It is balm that lessens my flames in order to not let me remain suffocated and burned by my love. I am Jesus, all love, and I manifest my greatest love in speaking about my divine volition. But do you know why? The essence of our life is recognized by speaking about it, and my fiat in my word bilocates and repeats our life in the midst of the creatures. Nor is there greater glory for us, nor fullness of outpouring of our excessive love, than seeing our life bilocated in order to give itself, to establish itself, to make her our place of center for as much as it is possible for a creature. It is one more kingdom of our love and will that we acquire. Therefore our creative work was not finished, but it continues, but not by creating new skies and suns in the universe. No, but our divine fiat has intended to continue the creation in virtue of its creative power, that as it pronounces its fiat, to create, to bilocate, and to repeat our divine life in the midst of creatures, there cannot be a more beautiful continuation of creation. Therefore pay attention to me and listen to me. Our Supreme Majesty has established ab eterno all the truths about the divine will that it must manifest, that are as so many queens in our divine being, waiting with invincible love to make their way through the earth, in order to bring, as queens, the great good to creatures of these knowledges about our fiat, that will bring the office of teacher, in order to form the creatures according to the truths that they announce. These queens of my truths will give the first kiss of the life of the fiat, and they will be gifted with the virtue of transformers, and of transforming into the same truth those who listen to them. And they will remain with them, ready to help them in their needs and to instruct them. They will be all love for them, disposed to giving them what they need, provided they listen to them and let themselves be conducted and managed by them. Now, all the truths about our will have not all gone forth yet, and those that remain wait with anxiety to come forth from within our divinity in order to complete their office and be bearers and transformers of the good that they possess. And when all the truths that we have disposed to come forth have been manifested, altogether these noble queens will give us the assault to our divine being, and as invincible army, with our own divine weapons, they will conquer us, and they will obtain the triumph of the kingdom of the divine will on earth. To resist them will be impossible for us, and by conquering God they will also conquer the creatures. This is the reason my speaking still continues, because all the queens have not come forth from our divinity in order to complete their office. And since the speaking about my will is the continuation of the creation of the fiat that created the universe, and as then the creation of the universe was preparation to the creation of man, so today my speaking about my fiat is nothing other than the continuation of creation in order to prepare the sumptuousness, the decency, for my kingdom and for those who will possess it. Therefore be attentive, and do not let anything escape you, otherwise you would suffocate an act of my will, and constrain me to repeat my lessons. July 24th, 1938, Volume 36. Difference between divine will and love. How one who lives in God's will receives the deposit of love of all created things and forms the shelf for the acts of our Lord. Appeal to all. I feel invested by the Fiat. It seems to me it calls me in all created things to give me its love so that I could love it more. But I was thinking to myself, what is the difference between love and divine will? And my adorable Jesus, repeating his short little visit, told me, "Daughter of my will is life. My love is food. Life cannot be without food. While if there were food with no life taking it, it would be useless. And God does not know how to do useless things. Life makes food arise. So both of them are necessary. Life cannot be formed, neither can it grow nor develop its great works without food. Food would remain without works, without giving itself in marvelous things, if it didn't have life that receives it. Furthermore, my will is light, while love is heat. They are inseparable. Light cannot stay without heat, neither can heat be with no light. They seem to be twins born of one birth. However, the first one to be born is the light, and then heat arises. So the heat is son of the light. In the same way, my will holds its primary act, while love remains its favorite daughter, its inseparable firstborn. If my will does not want, does not move, does not want to work, love would remain hidden inside its mother, doing nothing. If instead my will wants to operate, love runs, flies, is all attentive in works and steps, without ever tiring. It is this way also with the creature. If she lets my will move her, she will have true love. She will be still, constant, unshakable in the good. But if she is not animated by my will, her love will be as a painted love, with no life, inconstant. Poor love without the life of my will! The good and the works it will do will be exposed to the cold, the frost of the night, and the burning sun, that have the virtue to burn and dry even the most beautiful works. See then, daughter, the difference between my will and love. The daughter cannot be born without the mother. Therefore cherish the possession of its life in your heart, if you do not want to be sterile in the good, with no generations to populate heaven and earth. After this he added, "My blessed daughter, living in my will puts everything in order, and makes known the good that all created things possess, the love with which they are invested. They pour themselves on the creature to love her with a distinct love that each created thing possesses. Therefore, in one who lives in our will, we find the love with which we created heaven, the variety of our distinct love with which we dotted it with stars. Each star is a different love, and we see it sealed in the creature. As she loves us with so many different varieties of love, as many as are the stars, we feel our immense, infinite love being crowned by the crown of the love of the creature. Oh, how happy we feel in finding in her the love that crowns ours! So we redouble in return our love in her, to make her love us more than heaven with all its stars. We find in her the love with which we created the sun. The sun is one, but the variety of the effects and goods it produces are innumerable. Each effect is a distinct love. It can be a kiss, a caress of light from the Creator to his creature, a loving hug, or many acts of life, inside of which we make arise those effects that can be called food for the creatures. So we find in one who lives in our will the love and the variety of effects with which we created the sun. Oh, how we feel the return of love, kisses, hugs, of the variety of effects of love that the light possesses. And we feel our inaccessible light as being crowned by her crown of light and love. What doesn't our will let us find in one who lives in it? It makes us find the love with which we created the wind, the air, the sea, the tiny flower in the field, everyone and everything. And it gives us back this love redoubled, and we redouble again this love with which we created all things. Our love then makes a feast, feeling loved, returned, and it prepares new love surprises and forms the operating creation in the creature. This love binds all heaven and earth. It flows everywhere and becomes like cement, reuniting the division caused by lack of love between God and the creature. My love for one who lives in my divine will is such that I let her do whatever I do. I give her the right over my acts as if they were hers, and I stay there, anxiously waiting that she take my steps to let her walk, my hands to let her work, my voice to let her speak, so much so that if sometimes she stops using me, my love reproaches her sweetly, and with tenderness I say, "Today you didn't let me walk. My steps were there waiting for you, to walk in you, but you stopped them. My works today are suspended because you didn't give me the space to operate in your hands. I have been silent because you didn't let me speak in your voice. See, I even keep my tears on my face because you did not take them to use them to wash yourself, to be refreshed in my love, to take a bath for those who offend me. So I still feel my face wet from the crying. My pains are without kisses today. They are not softened by those who love me, so I feel them all embittered. Therefore, take all from me. Do not leave anything. Let my being, with all my acts, lean on you, on all your acts. So I will call you my support and my refuge. I will put in you, on the shelves of my will reigning in you, all the things I did and suffered while on earth. I will multiply them, increase them 100-fold. I will make them rise continuously to new life, so that you may take for yourself whatever you want, giving myself to all, so that everybody may know me and love me. Further, you must know that as the creature enters my will to do her acts, she roll calls all created things, the saints as well as the angels, so that each of them may be enclosed in that act. Oh, how beautiful it is to feel that, in that act, all love me, recognize me, adore me, and do the same thing. My will calls everyone. It imposes itself on all, and all remain happy and honored to be enclosed in that act done in the divine will, to love with new love, and with the love of all, the one who loved them so much. End of July 24th. Fiat.